Welcome to The Price of Civilization, the podcast that uncomplicates the tax code and explores how the money we pay shapes the world we live in. I'm Pietro Canestrelli. I have been a tax attorney for over 27 years, first working for the IRS and for the last 20 years defending taxpayers from paying more taxes than they legally owe. Let's dive into today's episode. All right, on today's episode of The Price of Civilization, I have a very special guest, someone I have known and have been friends for over 5 years, Josephia Rouse. Josephia, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? What do you do currently and how do you help people?
Well, hi, Pietro. It's so awesome to be here on the podcast talking about the thing that a lot of people don't really want to talk about except for one time of the year, which is our taxes and the tax implications that we see in our profession. I'm Josephia Rouse. I built a business to $2.5 million. It's called Divorce with a Plan and sold it in 2025. I stayed on as a business operator. I'm no longer in the lawyer function in the firm, but we help clients every day at the firm understand how they're going to live after their divorce, which includes creating financial plans, creating financial forecasts with experts. So I'm very excited to talk about how important it is to start planning for taxes early on when you're negotiating an agreement or just in general when you're planning your life after or during a marriage.
So divorce and tax problems, they kind of go hand to hand. They both elicit the same type of emotions, I'm guessing. My clients in the tax realm are scared. They're angry. They don't know what's going on. They don't see that path forward. Is that similar to your family law clients?
Yeah. I mean, as for taxes, it's not like it's one of those things where you don't necessarily see coming. I think a lot of people that get divorced, they're kind of planning, they kind of knew, but they don't know all the implications once the paperwork is in front of you. Just like taxes, like you know how much your mortgage is, that is a set amount. You know how much your utilities are, that is a set amount. But when it comes to your taxes, you don't necessarily know how much is going to be in the end, and that planning is so important because usually, right, when you're getting ready for tax season, you don't have to plan ahead. But when you're getting a divorce, you need to know that these agreements that you created, right, how are they going to affect your taxes when it comes around? And so part of the process is creating a plan and is relying on experts, especially when you look at the larger numbers. I mean, I think for divorce and taxes, someone will see a number in the hundreds of thousands and they just get scared. They are flustered. They're just, in a state of not knowing what to do next. Right. And that's when you have to bring in an expert, which we do every day, and bring in what will be the plan on getting our clients out of their situation. So I think there are a lot of similarities between divorce professionals and tax professionals.
And I know a lot of our clients, this is the moment, divorce is the time that breaks them. And they go through a divorce, and this is predominantly men. They go through a divorce and they stop even filing taxes. They shut down. They've been so devastated by that divorce. They shut down. They stop filing for years sometimes. And this is one of what I call the icebergs that people run into where their tax debt just gets out of control. So very dangerous time for people. And it's great. And I think it's great to have professionals to walk you through it and let them know that, yes, you are going to get beyond this divorce and you want to have your life after the divorce, right? A better life than you have now. That's the whole point.
Yeah. I also think that the reality is when they are holding off on filing taxes, there's not just the one option, right? When you're married, there's the one option. So you marry, file jointly. But what's in the best interest? Do you take one child on your tax return this year, and the other person takes the other child?
Right.
Is it better based on the income of the parties for one individual to take both children, and the tax liabilities that are decreased, right, is more of a financial savings
Right.
than the tax relief that the other person is going to get?
Right.
And all those considerations, we refer to our attorneys. We make sure that the attorneys here, has an expert to be able to discuss these things.
Right.
I think one thing that happens as we move along in our careers, maybe you started off making 70 and then now you're at 100 or you're at 200,000, and some things in your life has changed, but you don't realize the difference because your tax bracket has changed
Right.
over the course of your marriage.
Right.
But your liabilities have changed over the course of your marriage. So
That's
you
true.
have additional things that you need to consider. And that reset, even though we have the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world, I know being a prior IRS attorney, there are the patterns, right, that the IRS also looks at, and just coming up with what they believe is a fair settlement or tax resolution. So I think it's so important for people to take seriously the need to have an expert to understand what you've done
Right.
in your marriage financially, the decisions that you've made financially when it comes to level of employment or level of expenses,
Right.
and what makes the best sense for those liabilities so that after the divorce,
Mhm.
you're not hit with a tax situation you were not expecting.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So, Josephia, tell me a little bit more about your journey of becoming a super successful business owner. I know a little bit about it, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear about it.
So I tell this story and it's dramatic, and my life has evolved from it, but it's one that is very, very beyond true to my heart, but it started me out. So I know everyone has heard of the Simon Sinek book, It Starts With Why.
Yes.
And in anything that I do, my why has always been I like to make sense of things. My how is I like to do it the right way, and my what is I like to contribute. And one of the things that happened in my life, my sister was killed, and her body was found 400 miles away from her car. And when that occurred, I was really confused as to why her death was deemed a suicide.
Right.
I could not make sense of it.
Right.
I have more words to articulate that now. But at the time, I was on a journey of making sense of the judicial process, making sense of when is it appropriate, right, to give up on someone and say, hey, I don't have enough evidence and it should be deemed in one of these categories, right, because that's the closest. And it's just a dereliction of duty. Someone did not care and just put someone in a box, and did not care about their legacy and the way their legacy is recorded. And so I started off with a passion of just understanding. I just wanted to make sense of it all. And I went to law school, found out I didn't like necessarily being a state's attorney.
That's okay.
Found out I did not like to necessarily be a state's attorney. And I started on that journey of finding out what justice was. I fall in love with our judicial system. I love the idea of individuals that are in a learned profession that spend time determining what's ethical, what is the right way to do something, determining what's fair. And through that process, I became a very good family law attorney. I think family law specifically, you make sense of things for people and you put them on the right path. So I went to law school, decided I didn't want to be a state's attorney because the amount of impact I could have on someone's life was not the impact I wanted. I wanted people's lives to evolve before my eyes. And I find that divorce does that the best. You're in someone's life anywhere from 3 to 9 months, and you help them to navigate the norms of society. A very good divorce case, you show individuals what a fair custody schedule is. You show them how you can fairly split assets, and you talk about the things that will uphold both sides of this family. How will, a 50-50 custody uphold your family and make sure that your children are competent, profitable members of society who contribute back. You show your children how you negotiate together with very serious things, but you put everyone's life and everyone's future into consideration when you come up with this agreement. And you show yourself that you don't have to hold on to a person, but everyone is important, and their life is important, especially when you need to co-parent with that person for the rest of your children's lives. So I fell in love with it. We've grown. Like I said earlier, it was 2.5 million before I sold the firm and became just a business operator. But I built the firm with this idea that I wanted to make sense of separation for people, and I wanted them to see that after divorce, they still had a life, they still had children, they still have so much to grow, and that growing and that choice to divorce can be a part of a bigger arc in your life where you do better, that you have the resources to still have a good life. Not that point of a divorce in your life is the point where you deteriorate and you no longer thrive in society. So, I found divorce being that evolution arc is part of the service that I want to give to the community. And so I don't do it in the lawyer space anymore, but I do it on the back end, business operations, and making sure that we are pushing that why, which is to make sense of life and do it the right way. And then we contribute back to our society and to everyone around us.
So bringing order to the chaos of a bad marriage is what I see, what you thrive at. And like I talked about before, I see so many clients, daily, that this going through a divorce broke them. And they just went into the chaos. They did not have the type of representation that, your firm provides, in that, and you get what you pay for, right? If you want to do it yourself, or you want to ignore the problem, which is even worse, and you force the other spouse to do whatever is necessary to get that divorce done, you're not helping yourself in the long run. I understand that it's hard, but it's better not to fall into that chaos, because that's when tax issues magnify. That's when substance abuse, I see a lot. Whether it's alcohol or other substances, they get on this track, and many of my clients don't get out of this for many years, like 5 or 10 years, and they've wasted all that time in their life. So it's much better your approach is much better, obviously. You're literally giving people years of their lives that would be spent doing things that are not only unproductive, but downright destructive to what what everybody wants to do in their life, right?
Yeah, and I'm very proud that lives on in the firm that I owned prior. And I also think, to your point, it's very difficult for people to understand the return on investment from either a tax attorney or a divorce attorney, because I think the volume of the issue is, hey, just give me a settlement, or get me out of the situation. But to navigate a plan, to navigate what to expect from the IRS, to navigate and have a trusted advisor to tell you what the guardrails are. Hey, you're safe, or no, you're not safe. We have to do these things to help you get to safety zone. Those things contribute to peace of mind. And when you're seeking, you were saying earlier about the cost, when you're seeking a professional, those are the things you need to look for. Is this person guiding me towards a solution that makes sense to my future? Does this person care about my future? Because you're not talking to me about how this is going to impact the things that I care about. Then you really don't understand how you're going to speak for me when I cannot speak for myself. In your case, the IRS, and in the case of the firm that I owned prior, the lawyer speaking on behalf of the client. You can't even speak to that entity. So, I think when you talk about the risks of not having a professional, it's not just going in and hiring someone because they have the title.
Right.
It's investigating and making sure they care about your goals, your concerns,
Right.
and it's making sure that you understand how the plan that they are orchestrating for you will positively affect your future. That's the due diligence that the clients that the firm that I used to own have when they are reaching out to us.
Right. So I think this is hard for people that have never engaged attorneys before,
Mhm.
and this is a touch point. Many people that are getting a divorce never had an attorney involvement before. Many people with tax problems, they've never needed an attorney before. And one thing I think, and I want to talk about this a little bit, I want to hear your thoughts, is um, you're absolutely right. You have to have somebody that is willing to have an emotional connection with you, that is in aligned with what you're trying to do, who's willing to educate you on the process. All of these things really add up to communication.
Mhm.
And we believe in over communicating because, like people going through a divorce, they're all stressed. They want to know what's going on, even if nothing's going on.
Yeah.
They want to know that. And I don't want to, I'm sure there's tons of sole practitioners out there that do a great job, but having a firm that has multiple attorneys and multiple people, you're used, and trust me, I've used professionals in the past, including attorneys, for various things. Never a criminal attorney, uh, or a divorce attorney. Um, but one of the things I now come to realize is, be very careful with sole practitioners. This is my philosophy, because they only have a certain amount of bandwidth, and you need a team on your side. That is the best way to tackle just about anything. So, I speak for myself. Maybe you have a different opinion of that.
So, we both started with a philosophy of growing, right?
Yeah.
Around the same time. And I am at the point now where I believe that it's with the current, the thing about being a solo practitioner is that you can be the most learned, you can be in the courts, you
Right.
can communicate well with clients, but there are other obligations that attorneys have.
Right.
We have to have compliant trust accounts. We have to ensure that all of our communications are recorded and accessible. We have to make sure that all of our marketing is recorded and accessible.
Right.
We also have an obligation to be updated with all of the latest technology, including AI and things of that nature, to make sure that we are properly educating, we're properly utilizing technology to ensure that we're giving our clients the best chance at winning cases. Our obligations are, beyond those of a layperson or someone outside of our profession.
Right.
Even accountants, it's attorneys and it's doctors where that liability is there. And our liability records every communication we have, even if we have a communication outside of the 9 to 5 with someone at a party. That communication is monitored by our ethics. And when we have that level of monitoring, you can be the greatest attorney that there is, but there's only you, right? And you have a obligation to yourself to not overdo it. And so law firms, even though they can be solos, the amount of stress that your solo practitioner attorney has,
Right.
even if you have a cheaper amount, really is a lot more risk. They don't have the resources to ensure that they're able to respond to all clients
Right.
consistently. They have to choose what the priority is. They have to choose how many times they can communicate with you. They have to call you and say, "Hey, I may not be able to communicate with you because I'm in a trial and I can't communicate for 2-3 weeks." It doesn't mean that they're bad, right?
No.
But it does mean that the impact of you being able to be walked through a process without anxiety, without this wait time where you allow your brain and your Chat GPT account and your Claude account to go crazy, is one that a larger firm can help.
Right.
Divorce the plan now is 22 employees. They all help with different parts of the process
Yeah.
of getting through something that doesn't take a month. I mean, this is a legal process that you won't have full answers to. I know in taxes, maybe 3 to 6 months
For some things,
for some things.
most things, an audit is going to probably be a year. A tax court is probably going to be two
Yeah.
years. They take a long time. No, you're absolutely right. I love the show Better Call Saul. The
Mhm.
feisty sole practitioner doing
I
everything
love.
himself. Great show, but I wouldn't hire Saul to do anything because you never know when Saul's not going to be available. And you're absolutely right. There's so much more to running a law firm than the what the attorneys do.
Yeah.
And having that staff that can answer questions, that could get back to people, that can be that communication, that could make sure all the things that you're not seeing is actually working is
Hmm.
so incredibly important. I also think having multiple attorneys, there's kind of a mastermind going on. When you're by yourself, you're by yourself, and you're relying on your experience and your education. When you have two or three or more attorneys together, you have a lot more experience. Even if they're, I've been practicing for 27 years. The average is probably 10 years of the
Hmm.
attorneys on my staff. However, they have different backgrounds. They've been doing slightly different things for 10 years. It's all tax, but they bring a lot more to the table. Sometimes better ideas than what I had or the way I've been doing it. So I think that mastermind type idea of having multiple attorneys is another thing that sets law firms apart than sole practitioners.
I think it's also interesting because it happens so often, right, with a firm that has multiple attorneys, but delays in your case are avoided, right?
I
Someone could just get an attorney up to speed. It's not like that the attorney that may attend a hearing or may sign off on a document would not know your case. I mean,
right,
if your attorney gets sick, you don't have to worry about files being transferred over. It makes a difference in the client's life to get their file processed quicker. And I have a deep belief. One of my core beliefs as a law firm um, consultant and operator is the quicker we get someone through a problem the right way, right? Not sloppy, but the quicker you get someone through a problem the right way, the quicker they're able to move on in their life.
correct,
So every delay in responding to something from an agency or a court, every delay in just responding to a question so someone can fill out a form, every delay in anywhere in the process that
right,
could have been eradicated with attorneys just being there while someone's
right,
on vacation,
right,
right? Making a determination: is this something that will be critical to the case? Or is this something that will be nominally critical to the case, considering the judge, the
right,
jurisdiction,
right,
and your history on your file?
right.
And so, I know you take that very seriously. And building the firm, that was one of the core reasons why it starts with the plan. It starts with regular
Yeah,
letters to the client, not only for the client to know what's going on in the case, but if anyone needs to pick up that file internally, those case status letters, the attorneys at the firm are able to look and see what's going on. And so we take very seriously not just, hey, we can win this case for you
hmm,
or settle this case for you. We take very seriously that, we're going to make sure that we do it as quickly and properly as
right,
possible with no undue delays. We're going to make sure that the way that you go through it is comprehensive. and you're not relying on, I have to speak to the attorney, right? You can speak to a paralegal that can go over the attorney's notes. And if there's not something clear, you can have a second person just go through procedural and non-substantive things with you. So you don't even have to be charged at that attorney's rate.
Right.
There's a lot of things that come when we take seriously the impact of communication to the client and making a decision of having a larger firm and having people to support clients. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Just the support someone needs as soon as they need it is the number one reason I think of even going from a solo practitioner to a larger firm.
I love this discussion. I'm going to put a pin on it by saying too often solo practitioners are practicing a triage type legal. They're focusing on the things that have to be done today.
Priorities.
If you want to get a case moved, you have to be proactive. You have to be calling the court and asking about this or that to move the case. You have to be calling the IRS. You might have sent something in. If you're not being proactive, you'll wait for months. But if you're proactive, you have the bandwidth to do this. You could call. Someone's calling the IRS and asking, "Did you get that? When can we have a response?" Those type of things add up on a case life that you get things done quicker and probably cheaper because, like you said, not everybody bills at the same rate, and legal assistants bill a lot. Paralegals bill out a lot less than attorneys. If the attorney's doing everything, that's a problem.
That's the other piece of this, which is it's important. And we talked about the relationship with the client, but it's also the relationship you have with the IRS when you're calling them on a regular basis. They know your firm. They know what you're about. They know that you've looked through the documents thoroughly. They know that you're not going to just let something slip through the cracks. Same thing with opposing counsel. When they know the firm that is coming and they're coming prepared, it makes the biggest difference in how long a case is going to last and the settled outcomes.
Right. Excellent. So let's pivot and let's talk about some tax issues that you see in divorce and family law type of situations. I have an interesting one, and I'll start out and then I want to hear some of your stories. I have an interesting one in that what happens is some people get into aggressive tax strategies. Okay, and this means setting multiple entities up. The IRS doesn't like these. They'll be audited, and some people get past the audit, and that's not a problem. But there's money in buckets that they've set up in these strategies, and I have a recent case that is they're getting divorced. They're older, in their 70s. They're getting divorced. And the one spouse is wondering where those buckets of money are. And and the problem is, it was it was something that was kind of, you're trying to kind of hide things from the IRS. So it's not completely, it's kind of oblique what this is. But the one spouse is, we're getting divorced. I think there's money there. I don't care how you treated it in the past, but, I want my share of that money. Have you seen those type of situations in your practice where, I just thought that was an interesting thing in the divorce.
I think what you're highlighting is that more advanced, complicated structures that people are finding out from their grandkids or from TikTok or from online.
Right.
When you're not getting a professional to be involved, you're creating these complex structures. You're being very optimistic about your business and your future and your assets.
And you're assuming you're never going to get divorced. And this is not never going to.
Yeah, and just, I'm going to have this great business venture and it's going to, bring a lot of income.
Right.
And these accounts are going to allow my taxes and my whatever to be properly structured. And, it's a beautiful thing. and I have seen it, but my issue is always where's the maintenance, and I think that is in divorce and taxes. How are you maintaining these accounts? How often are you looking at your finances? How often are you looking at, did we lose? Did we gain? So yes, we see it, but that's where is it a red herring? Which is, I think, the point that you're making. Do you have a professional that's going to sit down with you and look at the structures of these organizations, look at the inputs of money and the outputs of money, and just say, hey, there's nothing here? Or are you going to have someone that's going to take you all the way down a 9-month or 1-year litigation or tax audit situation,
Right.
knowing there's nothing there? Right? It's just so imperative to. So yes, I've seen it, and it's one of the things where you sit someone in an office and you pull out the whiteboard and you walk them through the scenarios, right?
Okay.
And you come from the filter of, listen, this looks like a lot. Let me break it down, then it's not. Because you have the right to not be upset or think that someone is getting over on you. You have the right to know whether or not these assets are there,
Right.
and how you can just move on in your life. And I think that's the thing. You have to be I think in the last 10 years, I've seen that a lot more, but it's because people are being educated online, but they're not going through experts that care about their lives and outcomes, right? Because if I can sell you on setting up these organizational structures,
Right.
and I paid my whatever amount of money, and you don't know how to maintain it, and you don't know how you're going to offboard this,
and then
it doesn't matter.
Right. The
Mhm.
second question comes in,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you have it, and I'm curious how you handle it, is does the one spouse want to open this can of worms? Meaning there's potential tax liability that may or may not affect both spouses because they filed joint returns. You could go after this particular thing in the divorce court. You could do a whistleblower and let the IRS know about this. But do you really want to open that can of worms that might boomerang back at you? And because it is a joint liability and there is innocent spouse relief and all that, but do you really want to open that can of worms? And I think the classic example is, one spouse has a business, other spouse has nothing to do with, and the one spouse is doing all sorts of, incorrect, illegal things tax-wise in that business. They get a divorce. And is that something that you tell, and you represent the one spouse that doesn't own the business? Do you tell them, yeah, let's call the IRS on your soon-to-be ex-spouse? Have you run into that? How do you handle those type of things? I mean, when you were...
One of the things that you taught me a while ago was that the IRS cares about intent. So I don't know if anyone intended to do anything illegal.
Right. But let's go on that.
In a scenario that they did.
Right.
I think again, the firm that I used to own, the number one thing that was important to me is to understand the goals and concerns of my client.
Right.
But I am not a pound of flesh person, because I'm going to walk you through the impact of what you're doing in any decision you make. And so with that, we're not just talking about that immediate gratification that you get that person in trouble.
Yes.
If this person has no prior criminal history, what type of, impact do you think is going to happen, right? Yeah. There are remedies that person can make, especially if you don't know. If you're saying, I had no idea what was going on, then you're not a witness to it to make sure that they have a criminal conviction or some kind of penalty that will be attached to them anyway.
Right.
And that's where we go to someone's goals and their concerns and we make sense of it. Again, my why in everything I do, does this make sense? Because after you've proven that he was creating these organizational structures to hide money, and after you've proven that he is Stealing from the IRS. Do you know whether or not your divorce proceedings are going to be paused because of an IRS investigation and we can't have a settlement because
Right.
the IRS is starting to audit and we don't have finality in what we're doing? What is the end goal? Now, if your end goal is that you want to litigate until someone is drinking, outside the door and all that good stuff, then guess what my answer is? I'm not the person for you.
Right.
And I'm very any time when I owned the firm, any time that I had a situation that did not contribute to someone's life. Again, my what I do is I contribute to someone's life. If I'm not contributing to your life as a client, then I am not working for you. If it's not going to make your life better, then I'm not going to do it. And being in business operations now, I'm still able to do that on a daily basis, making sure that clients get a good outcome on the non-lawyer side. But when I was in that lawyer seat, that was the epitome of what I'm doing. I want to make sure that you understand that when you shoot that shot, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
Or if you want to shoot that shot and you know you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, this is not the place, because we're dealing with professionals who have a track record of making sure they are building on their life, and they are building on their children's life, and they are building their community. I believe in my community. I believe in building the lives of those around me so that they can have a life after. Right. So you're not going to find me fighting just fine.
Revenge and divorce is not something you promote, because there's no real revenge, right?
And you don't even know, what's the impact. You want to do one play,
right?
And at the end of it, someone comes to you and say, "Hey, I don't want to pay these taxes." Okay, well, in the future years, you're going to have to pay taxes unless you have a tax strategy. Well, I don't want to pay for tax strategy. It's like you got to choose your poison.
Right. I could see in family law so many, and some of my tax clients, they're angry at the IRS, and they want to sue the IRS, and they want to do this to the IRS, and they're willing to go to the Supreme Court and all that. And part of our education clients is we could spend a ton of money and we could drag this out forever, or we could find a resolution and a solution to your problem right now
that contributes to your life.
You could move on. And I'm 100% with you. I'm more, and I think it's our duty as attorneys, our ethical duty as attorneys, to explain, we could try to do that. I'm probably not the attorney to do that, because I'm here to solve problems, bring order, stop the chaos. I'm not here for a crusade against either the ex-spouse or the IRS. And maybe you should look for another attorney to do that, because I'm really not interested, because quite simply, that is not the best thing for you. Sure, it can make my firm a ton of money if you have money for all these billable hours, but it's what's good for me is not priority. It's not my ethical duty. It's what is good for you, and that is, let's solve this problem, right?
Yeah, let's move you away from one of the most stressful parts of your life, so that you can continue on and focus on your family and focus on your future.
Yeah, exactly. Any other tax aspect you see come up with clients a lot?
I think we touched on the innocent spouse.
Yeah.
One that, really should be done before your divorce is final, because once you're divorced, the rules are a little bit different. And with innocent spouse, I think that people really it's just like bankruptcy, I think.
Similar.
Yeah. Where it's, I don't want to do this because I don't want it to sound like this and I don't want it to look like this. But if I do this, my future is going to look like A, B, or C.
Right.
And especially with spouses that have no idea about the state of the business, whether or not a business has been filing taxes, whether or not a business has been paying into taxes. when they're truly, truly, truly innocent. Yes, you've lived the lifestyle. Yes,
Right.
have gone to, that there's a business that's making money, but you're not involved in the financial transactions of that business. You really need to think about your life and your future, especially if you're getting a divorce. It's not about feelings anymore. You are protecting
Right.
your future self.
Right. And quite simply, having that severance of the joint liability is so important down the road. Obviously, if you're getting a divorce or you're starting the process, you really should file married filing single,
Mhm.
because you don't want to be on the hook of whatever your ex spouse is doing.
Yeah.
We have handled dozens and dozens of innocent spouse, and we have a very good record on them. Unfortunately, um, I guess in a way, fortunately, that the code provides this, the Internal Revenue Code provides this. But I have found that, if you could show abuse in the marriage, that is really, um, the IRS respects that, and they should. It is in the code. It is difficult for a client to talk about that. They don't want to talk. Most people don't want to talk about how they were verbally or physically abused or mentally abused during their marriage, and that's. But unfortunately, that's something we have to bring up when we bring a client in and they want to do an innocent spouse, because it it smooths the path to actually getting that innocent spouse granted. Um, and it's amazing how many people, and we're talking women, initially say, "Oh, no, no, there was nothing like that," and then as they build the trust with us, all of a sudden they have police reports, they have doctors, medical evidence, they have psychiatrists, you know, testimony and statements. They have all the evidence they need to show this to the IRS, but they're reluctant initially because, again, it's a humiliation on their part, and they don't want to talk to an attorney they just met about it. So it's 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 sad that it's necessary to talk about these things, um, but that's one of the ways to really smooth the way to get an innocent spouse relief. And I don't know if that's your experience too.
It goes back to one of my, I was talking to you earlier about making it make sense.
Right.
And a lot of individuals, it doesn't make sense that they're having such an intimate conversation with you when they haven't been able to have it with their parents or their best friend or anyone else. They've been kind of able to talk about it, but they kept the secrets of their home in their home.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so important to emphasize that as a professional who's taking the time to be able to call you, to be able to give you the resources for you to know that this is where we're going to resolve this problem so that you have a better future.
Right.
When those clients open up to you as a professional, they are able to look at a life where this is taking into account. And because it's taken into account, you're not going to continue to bear the abuse, right? Because it then switches from physical to financial abuse. And I think it speaks to earlier, like some things that we caution about working with a solo practitioner versus working with a law firm owner. It may sound self-serving, but it's really in service of the client. And all the examples we gave earlier in service of the client, but this is another one.
Yeah.
Just being able to have the resources to dig and to say, hey, I'm looking at communications. I'm hearing you as you discuss certain things. I'm a little bit concerned. I want to go over what different scenarios look like for individuals that may or may not have been in your situation. And, I pride being able to say that is what we built with Divorce with a Plan before I sold it. And I definitely, like you said earlier, I've known you for 5 years. I know the work that you put into your firm, and that's what you guys have built.
Yeah.
Over communication, making sure people understand their rights. If you look at any of Pietro's videos online, it's educating. It's letting people know that there is a remedy. You
Yeah.
have to be truthful. You have to be transparent because we've seen it all. You're not the only person that has gone through this.
Yeah.
But you can be a person that gets through this well. That choice isn't ours. That's the choice that the client has when they trust you.
Well, this has been a really interesting and I find it fascinating conversation about taxes and divorce law and how they interop. I want to thank you, Josephia, so much for being on the podcast. And we're going to wrap it up right now. Thank you for tuning in today's episode. If today's conversation sparked new ideas about tax strategy, or if you have a tax issue, please comment below or click the link to set up a conference with my team. Please tune in next time and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.